correct a photo, first step always would be to take the background and duplicate it as usual, so we're not destroying that. And I'm just going to do a quick save as, because we also want to make sure that we're saving this as some sort of an edit so that it's not going over top of our original photo. And that should be your first step always, okay? Because you never want to destroy that original in case you hit the save button by accident. So always first we go to our adjustments and we change our levels. Now this picture, because it's so old and it's kind of all one kind of a color, when we look at our color histogram here, we don't have a lot of plays to work with. Our black point down here is almost at the very end. Same with our white point. So we can make small adjustments, but in this particular photo, it's not going to do a whole lot to it. And you can take and change your midpoint as well. The idea is you never want to overdo something. Subtle little adjustments are better than great big ones. Otherwise, it looks like it's been photoshopped, and that's not the point of it. When you Photoshop something, people shouldn't be able to tell it's been photoshopped. So that's your first step, is to do levels. Now, I can take and make adjustments to this whole picture, but the problem with this whole picture is that the people are very overexposed compared to the background with the wall and the tree. And if I just try and do an adjustment to the whole thing, I'll show you here in my adjustment. Say that I go into my brightness and contrast and I try to start adjusting it. And of course, I can make my wall look better, but then it ruins my people. And same thing, if I make my people look really good, then it ruins my wall in a lot of cases. So you can't do adjustments necessarily to the whole picture. You have to take and do it separate to different pieces of it. Now notice when I did this adjustment level, it actually created a layer here. And so that means that it's non-destructive. I can take that layer and I could go back into it later on and change my settings, or I could shut it off to test what I have without it being turned on. I can delete it. It's completely non-destructive. It's not actually changing the background. It's just working with the background. And I can see it's working with the whole photo because the whole photo has this white mask over top of it in that layer panel. If instead I had gone to my layer, my image, and made an adjustment here, that is a permanent adjustment and it's not easily fixed or changed afterwards. You kind of have to throw it out and start over again. So it's not a good idea to do your adjustments through here. It's better to do them through an adjustment layer, which you can do through layer and then do adjustment layers, and they are there. Or you can do it the quick way by going to your adjustments panel over here. If that panel's not on, you'll find it under window. So to isolate a part of the photo, start with your quick selection tool and drag as best as you can for a selection around the piece that you would want to isolate. And this is going to get too much. And then once you've got a quick selection, you can go and you can make fine adjustments to it. Using your lasso, remember that your Alt key, if you hold Alt, it will subtract out pixels that you don't want to be part of that selection. And if you use your Shift key, it will add pixels into part of your selection. So you just would very carefully now and painstakingly go and get your whole picture the way that you want it to be. So I'm going to pretend now that I have a good selection, that this is it. Because I want that selection to be saved, go ahead and say select and say save the selection and give it a name, and I'll call this people. That selection is now going to be part of the file so that when I save this file, I can tomorrow, next day, next week, whenever, get that selection back without having to reselect it. I can just go select and say load selection, and there's my people selection, and I can grab it. So it remembers it as part of the actual Photoshop file. So I'm going to take that selection. Now I'm on my background copy. I'll jump that to a new layer with Control J, so you can see now that just my people are on this layer. Now if I go to do an adjustment again, say I go to curves this time, you're going to notice that it's still working with the whole background. So it's still trying to make a curve adjustment based on what is on the background of the whole thing. If instead, I'll just delete that curve layer. If instead I only wanted to do that for my people, I would go and do a control and then click on this little tiny icon. And by holding control down, it loads that selection for me. Or I could say select load selection. When I then make my adjustment, now you'll notice that my mask is just showing the people. So when I adjust my curves now, it would just adjust that portion of the picture. So you see I can make some adjustments to the coloring on the faces, and I can take and adjust my coloring and start bringing back a little bit of color on her dress. And you can add different points on here for your mid-tones and whatnot through it. So the adjustments that you guys will want to work with to experiment, you're going to need to work with your brightness contrast to up the brightness and decrease your contrast a little bit. You're going to want to work with your curves. You probably want to work with your exposure a little bit and just go in and see what each one of these does. Hue saturation for portions of the picture and so on and so forth. Remember that if you want to see something before and after an adjustment, you can just use your little eyeball and you can shut it off or on. So there's with my curves and there's without my curves, with it, without. And then you can see what it's doing to your layer, and if you need to go back and adjust it, you can by simply selecting it and going back and making those changes to it. Now, a couple of the things that we want to do with this photo, and you probably should have even done this before you started playing around with color, because it'll help to improve some of the stuff that gets blown out when you're doing it. Go into your filter and go to noise and go to your dust and scratches and remove your dust and scratches. So you need to zoom into an area. Sorry, I'm on the wrong layer. That's why I've got a mask here. Do this on the whole background. So filter, noise, dust and scratches. And this will remove little pieces of dust and scratches. So if you can get to a portion, like maybe on his suit, see those little white pieces that are on his suit. And I can just increase my radius a little bit on there, and you can see how it gets rid of the dust and scratches. Do know, though, that this is blurring your photo, so you are going to lose the crispness in their faces when you do this. So you don't want to do it by much. Okay? So you can see here how it's just kind of removed a little bit of those dust and scratches. The other thing that you can do is remove some of them manually. We have what's called a spot healing brush. That's a good tool for this. That brush makes sure that it's got a little bit of fuzziness to it. You don't want it completely blurry. You want to give it a tiny little bit of hardness to the edge of it. And you basically make your brush just a little bit bigger than the spot that you're going to work on. So if I were going to do this little piece on his hair, you just click. And I guess I would have to be actually on the layer that's hiding it. And that's why I say I should do all of this kind of work before I make my changes, because now I'm working on different pieces of it. And so you can just click on top of these individual little pieces of dust, and you can painstakingly go through and you can correct them out. And what it's kind of doing is a clone stamp tool, but without you having to clone manually. It's just grabbing similar pixels that are around it and knowing what it is that you want to fix. And on a photo like this, it's painstaking because you've got a lot that you need to work with to get rid of all those little pieces of dust that are in especially dark areas. Some photos you won't have to do it as much with. This is the same tool that's used to remove blemishes on people and to also remove, or not remove, but to tone down, I should say, the wrinkles on older people to make them look just a little bit younger. So once again, start with your levels. Do your dust and scratches. Do your healing brush to get rid of any extra dust. Then you can select the area that you want to isolate. Make sure you save that as a selection so that you can load it easily again. Jump that to its own new layer, and then from there you can start making adjustments in your adjustments panel to the various things. And usually the ones that you're going to use would be your brightness contrast, your exposure, your curves, and sometimes this hue saturation is needed for especially an old photo like this where you can where you want to bring out colors in it. There you have it.